Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a pretty major transition for a lot of businesses using SAP.
That's right, moving from the classic ECC system to the newer S/4HANA platform.
Exactly. And our focus today is really specific. How do you get your customer and vendor information across? Making that leap into the S4 HANA Business Partner Framework.
Which is a fundamental shift in itself.
Right. So we're using a guide to ECC to S4 HANA migration with Migration Cockpit as our source material here. We want to pull out the essential steps, the configurations, basically what you need to know when you're using the Migration Cockpit for this.
Yeah, think of it as understanding the mechanics of moving those core business relationships smoothly. It's not just an upgrade, like you said. S/4HANA's Business Partner, or BP, it's designed as the central point for everything.
Replacing the old separate customer and vendor records people are used to.
Precisely. And the guide shows how the Migration Cockpit tool really acts as that bridge.
Okay, so the guide seems to break this down. 3 main stages, is that right? First up is pre-migration.
Pre-migration. It's all about getting your current ECC system prepped, laying the groundwork.
And what's key there?
Well, the guide points to a foundational step. Your basis consultant needs to apply specific SAP notes. Think of them as patches or updates from SAP to make the whole thing smoother.
Okay, essential updates.
Then, your functional consultants step in to prep the system from a business process angle.
Got it. So groundwork first. Then phase 2 is technical migration. Sounds like the heavy lifting part.
And that's exactly it. This is where the actual data conversion and the system switch over to S/4HANA happens.
Who handles that?
Your basis team, the infrastructure folks, and your ABAP developers, the SAP programmers,
Yeah.
they're the key players here, according to the guide.
And what actually gets moved? Is it everything?
Almost everything. The guide is pretty specific.
Hmm.
Master data, so customer, vendor, material data. Transactional data like sales orders, purchase orders, even your custom ABAP stuff, enhancements reports, custom Z tables.
Okay, so most of the core business data.
Right. But, and this is a crucial point the guide makes, rebate agreement data is not converted during this phase. That's handled differently later.
Okay. Good to know.
And another vital thing, during this technical migration window, all business operations on the live production server have to stop completely.
Wow. Okay. Major downtime implication there.
Okay.
For data integrity, presumably.
Absolutely. You can't have data changing while you're trying to migrate it.
Makes sense. So that brings us to the final stage, post-migration. What's the focus now?
Post-migration is all about making sure the new S/4HANA system is ready to run the business. Functional consultants are back in the driver's seat here.
And what are they doing?
A few key things highlighted in the guide. First, configuring the business partner framework properly in S4. Then, migrating any remaining condition master data that's pricing, discounts, that sort of thing.
Right.
Migrating the credit master data, making sure credit limits are right, and then actually configuring the credit management functions within S4HANA.
So setup, data migration completion, and then configuring the new S4 features.
Yep. Exactly. A clear 3-step process outlined in the guide.
Okay, let's zoom back into that pre-migration phase in ECC. The guide mentions some important setup beyond just the SAP notes.
Oh, definitely. After Basis applies those notes, there's some critical configuration work. The big one is customer vendor integration, CVI.
CVI, okay.
Think of CVI as the mapping mechanism. It connects your existing customers and vendors to the new BP structure. In ECC, you're focusing on the customer to BP direction initially.
Right, linking the old to the new.
And you also need to define your BP roles, like is this BP a customer, a vendor, both?
Right.
And BP groupings, how you categorize them. Plus setting up the number ranges for these new BPs.
Number ranges, okay.
And finally, assigning your existing customer and vendor account groups to these new BP roles and groupings. It's all about creating that link.
Sounds like a lot of groundwork mapping. And the guide mentions some system checks you need to run before migrating, like health checks.
Yes, 2 crucial ones. First is the upgradation check report. Program aim is pre-check upgradation report. You run it in transaction SA38 or SE38.
And what's that checking for?
It's specifically looking for readiness issues related to this customer vendor to BP transition. The guide is clear. This report must complete successfully for this part of the data. No errors allowed here.
Okay, a mandatory check. What's the second one?
That's the simplification item check report. Program SDFRC start check. This one's broader, looking at overall S/4HANA compatibility across your system.
And the results matter here.
Very much so. The return code is key. The guide says less than 7 means errors you can probably skip for now. A 7 means issues that will block things after migration. But anything over 7, That's a showstopper. Stop the migration, fix the problems.
Wow, so those pre-checks are absolutely critical gatekeepers.
Couldn't migrate without them running clean, really.
Okay, assuming those checks pass, the guide then talks about the actual migration using the SAP Migration Cockpit. That's the tool we're focused on, right?
Exactly. The Migration Cockpit is SAP's tool specifically designed to handle this data load into the business partner framework. It guides you through it.
Right. Let's shift back to the technical migration phase itself. The guide detailed what data moves. Can we recap that quickly? Master data, transactional data.
Yep. Customer, vendor, material masters. Sales orders, purchase orders. Custom ABAP code, custom Z tables.
Got it.
Condition data pricing stuff gets partially moved here, with the rest coming post-migration.
And the big exception was?
Rebate agreements, not moved in this technical phase.
Okay. And you mentioned something interesting about how condition master data is handled differently. ECC uses the KONV table. S/4HANA uses pure C elements.
Yeah, that's a technical detail, but important. The way pricing conditions are stored changes.
So how does the migration handle that change in table structure?
Well, the technical team applies specific SAP notes. These notes basically tell the system how to redirect or translate the data. The guide gives examples, like data from table VAUK in ECC gets mapped to VBAK in S4, VUBP maps to VBAP. It bridges those structural gaps.
Ah, so the notes provide the translation logic.
Essentially, yes. And once all that technical data movement and redirection is done, the system gets handed back to the functional consultants.
For the post-migration phase in the new S4 system. Okay, so what's first on their list then, according to the guide?
Priority 1 is business partner configuration again, but now focusing on the BP to customer's direction.
So the reverse linkage?
Kind of. It's about making sure the BP data created in S4 now correctly represents and links back to the corresponding customer-specific data views within S4. It's all about ensuring consistency.
Validating the migration worked, basically.
Then, migrating that remaining condition master data, KONV, to PRC elements, and setting up and migrating the credit master data, leveraging the new S4 functionalities.
And the guide mentions some optional things, too, after the main stuff.
Yeah, things that depend on specific business needs.
Right.
Configuring settlement management, which can replace the old rebate functionality. Setting up BRF Plus, that's the Business Rules Framework Plus, for automating decisions, often used in billing. And Advanced Available to Promise, AATP, for companies needing more sophisticated order fulfillment logic.
Right, so those are add-ons depending on requirements. Now, what about organizations with existing complex SAP landscapes? Lots of ongoing changes, transport requests. How does this fit in?
Good question. The guide highlights some pre-migration steps for that scenario. You need to sort of finalize or close out any pending transport requests in ECC.
Get those changes finished or parked?
Right. Or if they can't be finished, Basis needs to back them up so they can be reapplied later in S4. And obviously a full backup of production ECC restored to development is standard procedure.
Safety first.
Absolutely. Then, just like any migration, Basis applies the necessary SAP notes to get things started.
Okay. Now, the guide has this big section on configurations, prerequisite for migration project. It lists a lot of SPRO paths. SPRO being the main config menu in SAP. For listeners maybe less familiar, this looks detailed.
It is. Very detailed. These are foundational settings. A really key one is activating post-processing orders, or PPOs.
PPOs?
Yeah. And the guide notes a directional aspect here. In ECC, you often focus PPO for customer to BP. But in S/4HANA, you need it configured for BP to customer as well, using specific nodes like CVISO3 and CVISO4 in SPRO. It ensures the link works both ways properly in the new system.
Okay, bidirectional linking.
And then for the migration cockpit itself to work for BP migration, you have to activate specific function modules. These are like pre-built code blocks. The guide lists several, like Plamapen WX Create and MDS VP Outbound. You activate these via SPRO too.
So enabling the tools and the processes, what about synchronization controls?
Yes, several settings there. Things like synchronization control for master data, activating PPO requests for platform objects, activating specific sync options for the ECC to S4 migration. It's all about making sure the data fields map correctly and consistently to the BP model.
It feels like a lot of switches need to be flipped correctly.
That's a good way to put it. Precision is key.
And then the guide gets really granular. Assigning attributes for contact persons, department, function, authority, VIP status, even marital status, legal forms, payment cards, industries.
Wow. It really underscores the level of detail required, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Take departments for contact persons. The guide says you need to make sure the department codes from ECC exist in S4, maybe copy them over.
Right.
Then you explicitly map the ECC department code to the corresponding S4 BP department code using specific CVI configuration paths in SPRO.
So you're linking code to code.
Exactly. And the same process applies to their job function, their authority level, if they're marked as VIP, their marital status, the legal form of their organization, payment cards they might use.
Okay, meticulous mapping.
Even customer industries. The guide even flags that vendor industries might need separate mapping. It shows you can't just assume things will line up automatically. You have to configure these links.
And it covers address determination, forms of address like Mr. M's, tax numbers, geographic codes. It's comprehensive.
It has to be, really. These details ensure everything from address formatting to tax handling works correctly in the new S4BP structure.
Okay, so after all that prerequisite config, the guide outlines the actual steps for customer to business partner migration. What are the key actions here?
First step, according to the guide, figure out your customer account groups in ECC. You look at the KNA1 table, that's general customer data, and see how many customers are in each group.
Get your baseline numbers.
Exactly. Then document the specifics for each group, like its number range interval, is it external numbering, etc. Often done in Excel, the guide suggests.
Okay, document ECC setup.
Then, the crucial part. You go into S4HANA Shreo and configure the business partner settings, groupings, number ranges to match or align with what you documented from ECC.
Mirror the setup.
Right. And finally, after you run the Migration Cockpit, you do a validation. Compare the record count in the original KNA1 table with the count in the new BUT 1000 table. That's the main BP table. And also check the CVI link table, which connects the old customer number to the new BP GUID. You're checking for consistency.
Verifying the numbers match up. And the guide gives 3 scenarios for how that verification might turn out.
Yeah, basically ways to quickly check the technical success. Scenario 1. UD 1000 is updated. CV link is updated. That's the ideal state migration. Looks good.
Green light.
Scenario 2. UD 1000 updated, but CV link isn't. The guide says this is generally okay, but you should run a specific check report, VC customer link check report, to fix those missing links.
So fixable.
Right. But scenario 3 is the bad one. UT 1000 isn't updated. If the BP records weren't created in the main table, that's a major problem. The guide says you likely need to raise an issue with SAP support.
Okay, clear warning signs there. The guide also briefly mentions different ways to think about the BP, like BP equals customer only, or vendor only, or neither, and points out the key tables BUT 1000 and CVI CUSLink, linked by partner grid. Why is that conceptual bit important?
It helps you understand the flexibility of the BP model in S4HANA. Knowing a single BP can represent multiple roles helps you design your setup logically. And understanding that partner get is the technical key linking the BP general data, BUT 1000 to the customer-specific link table, CVI SES link, is vital for troubleshooting or any data analysis you do later.
It's the glue holding it together.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, then the guide provides a really detailed walkthrough of configuring BP integration within ECC, starting with extracting account groups from KNA1 using transaction SE16.
Right. It shows using SE16 to see your customer account groups, counting the entries for each. The example had, say, 4 entries for one group.
Okay.
You document that account group code, number interval, probably in a spreadsheet like we mentioned. That becomes your blueprint for the S4 BP config.
Got it. Then defining BP roles, number ranges, and groupings in ECC.
Exactly. The guide mentions standard SAP roles like FLCU00 for customer finance data, FLCU01 for sales data, and similar ones for vendors, FLVN00, FLVN01.
Standard roles to use or copy.
Right. And when setting up number ranges and groupings, the guide stresses aligning the BP external range with the customer range if you want to keep the same numbers. You also define field properties, mandatory, optional, hidden for each role.
Customizing the data entry for each role.
And then the crucial CVI mapping step, linking the ECC customer account group to the S4 BP grouping you defined.
Making that explicit connection.
Yep. The example showed mapping BP grouping ZD01 to customer account group JD02. It noted there were 4 customers in JD02 in ECC, but 0 BPs yet in BUT 1000 for ZD01 because the migration hadn't run. This mapping tells the system how to translate during migration.
Okay. Then the guide loops back to that upgradation check report, mentioning a specific error about BP role direction. How do you fix something like that?
The example error basically says, hey, you haven't configured the BP role for the customer to BP direction.
Ah, a missing config link.
Exactly. The fix involves going into SPRO, Finding the right path for defining BP roles for direction customer to BP, assigning the ECC account group to the S4 BP group there, and defining number assignment for that direction. Then you rerun the check report to confirm the error is gone.
Configuration tweaking based on the check results. Makes sense. And then the main event, migrating customer to BP using the Migration Cockpit.
Yes. Transaction MDS load FIC applique. The guide says you select the migration object customer business partner. You can filter, maybe run it one account group at a time.
Monitor the progress.
Right, monitor the queue. And the key verification afterwards, as the guide emphasizes, is checking the BUT 1000 table. Did the BP group get assigned correctly? Does the number of entries in BUT 1000 now match the count you had in KNA1 for that group?
Like the example where it went from 0 to 4 entries, matching the 4 customers?
Precisely. That's your confirmation it worked at the table level.
Okay, almost there. Finally, the guide covers post-migration configurations, specifically on the S4HANA server itself. This is the final polish.
Yeah, final checks and configurations in the new S4 environment. Things like reactivating post-processing orders, maintaining synchronization objects again, activating PPO requests, sync options, contact person integration.
A lot of activating and configuring.
And crucially, managing the number ranges in S4. For customer number ranges, you might keep them external, manual assignment, or maybe close the old ones and create new external ones. But for the business partner number ranges, in table BUCF, the guide says these are usually set to internal system assigns the numbers automatically.
Ah, interesting difference there.
And lastly, configuring the BP settings for the other direction, BP to customer, setting the role category, assigning number ranges for that direction. That completes the loop.
Wow. Okay, that is a remarkably detailed process. It really spans both systems, ECC and S4, with so many configuration points and dependencies. Migrating to the business partner framework is clearly no small task.
Definitely not. The guide really paints a picture of needing that structured multi-phase approach. Getting the pre-migration config right in ECC and the post-migration setup right in S4 is just critical.
In understanding the data structures KNA1 versus BUT 1000 and using those tools like the check reports and the Migration Cockpit effectively seems absolutely key.
Couldn't agree more. Those are the essential ingredients the guide lays out for a successful transition of this core data.
So for you listening, if S/4HANA migration is on your roadmap or maybe you're in the middle of it, understanding these intricacies around the business partner migration is just vital. Hopefully this deep dive gave you a solid grasp of what's involved.
And that actually brings up a final thought. We've talked through the technical steps, the configurations outlined in the guide, the need for cross-team collaboration, but given that complexity, what unexpected things might pop up? What unforeseen data dependencies or hidden business process impacts might organizations discover beyond these documented technical steps during the actual migration journey?
That's a really good point. What lies just beneath the surface of the technical plan? Definitely something to think about.